There's a mirror in the upstairs hallway, full length, pine frame. I made it myself in 1983 because Helen wanted one near the bedroom door so she could see herself before she went out. Good pine, good glass, hung straight. It's been in that hallway for 41 years. For the better part of 4 years after Helen died, I stopped looking at it. Not deliberately, not all at once, just gradually. I'd walk past it the way you walk past a picture you've had on the wall so long you've stopped seeing it. I'd pass close enough that I'd catch the edge of myself in the peripheral, a shoulder, a hand, the corner of a gray head, and I'd keep walking, down the stairs, to the kitchen, to the shop, without stopping, without looking. It wasn't a decision I made. It was more like the mirror and I had reached some kind of mutual agreement. It wouldn't make demands of me. I wouldn't make demands of it. I'm 82 years old. My name is Walter. And today, because of something that happened last spring that I want to tell you about, I want to talk about mirrors, about the avoiding of them, about what the avoiding is really about, underneath the surface reason most of us give ourselves, and about what I found when I finally looked again, properly, for the first time in years. I don't think you're avoiding mirrors because you're vain. I don't think it's about appearances, not exactly. I think it's something older and stranger than that, and I want to try to say what I think it is, because I've been living with the question for a while now, and I think I've found some of the answer. Sit with me. The fire's been going since early. There's coffee on the table. Take your time. The first thing I want to say is about what the mirror actually is, not the object, the function. A mirror does something specific that no other object in your house does. It shows you yourself from outside yourself. Every other perspective you have on your own life is from the inside. You feel your body, you sense your weight and your movement, you experience the world through your own eyes. But the mirror removes you from that interior position and places you in the position of an observer, of someone watching you from across the room. That's a strange experience at any age. At 25, it's usually manageable, because the outside version of yourself and the inside version are reasonably close to aligned. The person in the mirror looks like the person you feel like. There's continuity. After 65, and especially after 70, after 75, after 80, the continuity starts to break down. The person you feel like on the inside is not quite the same person who is looking back at you from the glass. You feel, on the inside, more or less like yourself at 50, like the person who climbed ladders and ran a business and had young children at home and was, in the physical sense, still most of what he'd been. The inside picture hasn't updated the way the outside picture has, and the mirror forces the update. That's why we stop looking. Not because we're ashamed of being old, not because we're vain and disappointed by what we see, but because the update is disorienting. Because the gap between the inside picture and the outside picture is hard to look at directly. Because the mirror is, in some essential way, showing you something true that you haven't quite made peace with yet. The avoiding of the mirror is the avoiding of the truth of time, and that's not a small thing to avoid. That's a very understandable thing to avoid. I want to be specific about what the gap feels like, because I think describing it precisely is the only way to make it real rather than abstract. There's a version of me that lives in my own body, in my own head, that I carry around with me every day. It's the version that knows how to do things, that knows which grip to use on a particular tool, that has an instinct for how cold it's going to be when it sees a certain kind of Maine sky, that knows the sound of this house, every creak and settle, the particular noise the furnace makes before it kicks on. This version of me is inside the body. It's running on accumulated knowledge, on muscle memory, on decades of learned responses to the world. That version feels, in a lot of ways, like the man I was at 55. Not always. There are days when the body argues loudly, and the disparity is impossible to miss. But in the ordinary flow of a day, in the doing of things I know how to do, the inside version of me is a continuation of who I've always been. The mirror breaks that continuity. The mirror says, no, look, this is what the outside of that experience looks like. And the outside looks like 82 years. Like the white hair and the changed face, and the hands that are stiffer in the morning than they were, and the shoulders that are slightly rounded now from decades of leaning over a workbench. The outside is not wrong. The outside is correct. The outside is what is actually there. But the gap between the inside knowing and the outside showing is where the disorientation lives. And the avoidance of the mirror is, at its core, the avoidance of the disorientation. The choosing to stay in the inside version, because the outside version requires an adjustment you haven't fully made yet. I understood it about myself around the 3rd year after Helen died, when I was trying to think honestly about what had changed in me and what the changes were costing. I'd avoided the hallway mirror for long enough that I'd started to avoid other mirrors too. The one in the bathroom got less use. I'd stopped looking in the truck's rear-view mirror at myself. When I was in the hardware store, I'd turn away from the glass faces of the display cases that caught my reflection. It had become a habit, a reflex, a flinching away. And I was starting to feel, underneath the flinching, a kind of disconnection between me and my own body, between the person I was moving through the world as and the person I was inside. The hiding from the mirror had, I think, allowed the inside picture to stay frozen at some earlier version of myself. I was protecting that picture, keeping it current by not challenging it. But a picture that you protect by not challenging is not a true picture. It's a curated one. And living inside a curated picture of yourself is a particular kind of inauthenticity that costs something, though the cost is hard to name. Because I want to push back on the easy explanation. The easy explanation is the vanity one. We don't like what we see. We're disappointed by our aging bodies. We avoid mirrors the way we might avoid pictures from a vacation that didn't turn out the way we'd hoped. Simple disappointment, simple aesthetics. I don't think that's what it is, or not mostly. When I started looking at myself in the hallway mirror again, after years of not doing it, the first thing I noticed was not disappointment. It was something more complicated, more layered, something that took me several mornings of looking before I could begin to name it. Here's what I saw in those first mornings. I saw my father. Not a metaphor, not poetically. I mean, I stood in front of that mirror in the upstairs hallway of the house I built in 1971, in the morning light that comes through the window at the end of the hall, and I looked at my face, and I saw my father's face. My father died at 51. I'm 82. I've been older than my father ever got to be for 31 years. And I've known, abstractly, that I look like him. People told me so for decades. Susan and David both have said it. My sister used to say it before she died. I knew it the way you know a fact. But standing there in the mirror that morning, I felt it. Not the fact of it, the reality of it. My father's forehead, my father's jaw, the particular way the skin goes around the eyes that I associate entirely with his face in my memory. I was looking at my father, 30 years past where he got to, and the feeling that came with that was not what I'd expected. I'd expected, I think, something like sadness, like the grief of absence, the "you should be here" kind of feeling that comes sometimes when I think about my father. Instead, what came was something I can only describe as a kind of tenderness. For him, for myself, for the whole long passage of time between when he was alive and now, and what that passage had made. I stood there for a while, just looking. At my father's face, at my face, at the 82 years that had accumulated in it, at the hands that looked like his hands, at the particular kind of old man that the son of a Quebec mill worker, raised in Bangor, who spent 45 years building things, has become. That's not what you see if you avoid the mirror. What you see in the mirror, if you stay long enough to actually look, is not disappointment. It's the whole of it, the whole accumulated truth of a life, worn on the face that carries it. And that is not a small thing. That is, in fact, a very large thing. One of the largest things you can see. I want to tell you what happened the next few mornings, after that first morning when I saw my father's face, because it didn't stop there. The face had things to show me beyond that first recognition, and I stayed long enough to see them. The second morning, I noticed my mother. She died in 1989, and I don't look much like her. I take after my father in the bone structure, in the jaw. But there's something around my eyes that's hers, a particular kind of attention in the set of the eyelids. She was an attentive woman, my mother. She watched things closely. She noticed things. And that quality of attention is in my face somewhere, though I couldn't point to the exact thing that carries it. Standing there the second morning, I had the strange feeling that I was looking at a family, not just myself. My father's forehead, my mother's eyes, my grandfather's hands, the whole accumulation of the people who came before me and who made me and whose faces I am still carrying around in mine. Helen used to say I didn't look like myself when I hadn't slept. She meant it as a practical observation. You need more sleep, Walter. But I've thought about that since. What does it mean to look like yourself? And I think what she meant was that when I was rested, the face was more recognizable, more present, more fully its own thing. After those mornings at the mirror, I started to understand a little more about what she meant. Looking like yourself has something to do with presence, with being actually in your own face, behind your own eyes, inhabiting the exterior the way you inhabit the interior. Not performing it, not managing it, just being in it. The mirror shows you whether you're in your own face or not. And sometimes what's frightening about looking is not the face itself, but the sense that you might have drifted from it. That the person looking out from behind those eyes is slightly less present than you'd like, less claimed. That was some of what I was hiding from, I think. Not the appearance, the presence question. I said at the beginning that I started avoiding the hallway mirror not long after Helen died, and I want to look at that more carefully, because I don't think it was a coincidence. There's a particular quality to looking at yourself in a mirror when the person who loved you is gone. When you were married, when the person who saw you every day, who watched your face change over 54 years, who was the most constant witness to the outside of you, when that person is no longer there, looking at yourself in the mirror has a different weight. When Helen was alive, my face was partly hers. She saw it. She knew it. She had an ongoing relationship with the outside of me that gave the outside some of its meaning. When she looked at me, and she'd looked at me every day for 54 years, I was being seen by someone who loved what she saw. Not just the young face, not the handsome early years, but the whole accumulation. She'd watched it all happen, and she'd loved it as it happened. When she died, I lost the person who witnessed me. And standing in front of a mirror without the person who witnessed you is a lonelier thing than standing in front of a mirror when they're there. It's the difference between being seen and simply being visible. I was visible to the mirror. Without Helen, I was less seen. I think this is part of what drives the mirror avoidance in older people who have lost someone. Not the appearance, but the absence of the witness. The face in the mirror is the same face, but the love that was trained on it is gone. And looking at the face without the love there feels like looking at something that has lost one of its essential meanings. I've thought about this a lot, about what it means that I avoided the mirror after Helen died. And I've come to think it wasn't really about the face in the mirror. It was about the absence of her eyes on my face. It was grief, wearing the costume of vanity. Because grief often wears that costume. Grief at this age is not always the loud kind. It's often quiet. It hides in habits, in the things you stop doing, in the objects you stop using, in the rooms of the house that you close off and don't go into. In the mirror, you walk past for 4 years without stopping. The fourth thing I want to tell you about is what happened last spring that changed things. It was April. Lily had come up for a long weekend. She does this twice a year, sometimes 3 times. She sleeps in Susan's old room. We eat badly and talk a lot, and it's some of the better time I have. On the second morning, she came downstairs early and found me in the kitchen making coffee. She was still in her pajamas, hair not done, half asleep, the way she is in the mornings. She stood in the kitchen doorway and she looked at me, just looked at me, the way young people look at old people they love, with that particular quality of attention that is partly affection and partly something else, something more searching. And she said, "Grampy, you look like the best kind of old man." I didn't know what to say. I said, "What does that mean, Lily?" She said, "It means you look like someone who's been through things and kept going. You look like someone who built something and it lasted. Your face looks like your life. Your face looks like your life." I held that in the kitchen for a minute, and then I went upstairs after breakfast to the hallway mirror, and I looked. Not the way I'd looked before, a few years back, when I'd first started looking again and seen my father's face. This time I tried to see what Lily saw. The best kind of old man. Someone who'd been through things and kept going. And I'll tell you what I found, standing there in that hallway light, at 82 years old, looking at the face that Helen had loved and that my children had grown up with, and that my granddaughter could look at and see a life in it. I found that it was honest. The face in the mirror was honest in a way that faces aren't always honest. Every year was in it, every winter, every job that went over budget, and every one that came in right. Every morning I'd gotten up before the sun, every cup of coffee at the kitchen table with Helen, every argument that cost something, and every one that cleared the air, every child I'd raised, and every grandchild I'd held, the death of my father, the death of my friends, the death of my wife, the building of this house, the making of 45 years of things that are still standing. All of it was in the face. The face was the record. And I thought, why would you not want to look at your own record? Why would you turn away from the most honest document you have? The avoiding of the mirror is the avoiding of the record. And the record is not bad. The record is simply true. And true is not the same as bad. Let me stay with the witness thing a little longer, because I think it's the part that gets missed when people talk about older people and mirrors. The conversation almost always goes to appearance. They don't like how they look, they're vain, they're in denial. And maybe for some people that's true. I can't speak for everyone. But for the people who've lost someone, I think it's the witness. A face that is loved looks different than a face that is merely visible. Not in the literal sense, the same physical features are there, but the quality of being seen is different. Being loved by someone who knows your face is being witnessed. Being visible in a mirror with nobody there to see you is something else. When Helen was alive and I walked past the mirror in the morning, she might see me. She might glance up from something and notice me passing, and the noticing was a small daily act of witness. She saw me without looking deliberately, the way you see things that belong in the landscape. She saw me the way she saw the cedars outside the window, as something that was hers and that she was used to and that she could read. When she died, I lost the person who could read me. And looking in the mirror, really looking, felt in those years like standing in front of an audience of one that was no longer there. The mirror waiting for the witness gone. I've had to learn to be my own witness. That's a strange skill to develop at 82, but that's what the mirror practice has been, slowly. Learning to look at myself with the quality of attention that Helen brought. Not the same. I don't have her eye. I don't have her particular love of the exterior of me. But something like it. A willingness to see. A refusal to look away. It's harder than it sounds. The witness we carry for ourselves is often harder than the witness someone else gives us. Because we know everything. We know the failures and the shames and the things we'd prefer not to see. The external witness doesn't always know those things. Helen knew mine, mostly, and she saw past them. I know mine entirely, and seeing past them to the actual face requires more effort. But it's worth the effort. The face that looks back from the mirror is the real face. Not the constructed self-image, not the managed performance, not the person you're trying to be, the actual face. And the actual face deserves to be looked at directly by the person who lives in it. The fifth thing, and I want to spend some time here because I think it's the one that gets missed, is about what mirrors actually show us when we're willing to look, and why the looking is worth something. Helen used to do something in the mornings that I observed for 54 years and never quite understood until she was gone. She'd stand in front of this same mirror, the pine-framed one in the hallway, for about 2 minutes every morning before she went out. Not to apply anything, not to fix anything, not even to check anything in particular. Just to look. Just to be with herself for a minute. I asked her about it once. Years ago, maybe in our 40s, I said, "Helen, what are you doing in front of that mirror every morning?" And she said, "Walter, I'm saying hello." I thought that was a quirk, one of her small, charming things. I understand it now. Saying hello to yourself in the mirror is not vanity. It's not self-regard in the negative sense. It's a kind of acknowledgement, a kind of presence, a way of saying, I see you. I see who you are today. I see what the years have put in your face, and I'm not going to look away from it. I'm going to stand here and look at you the way Helen looked at me, with a willingness to see all of it. When I stopped doing that, when I stopped saying hello in the mirror, something happened over those 4 years that I didn't fully notice until I started looking again. I became slightly less present to myself, less aware of my own face in the world, less connected to the exterior version of me that other people see. You live in your body, you know, not just inside it, but with it, as a public thing, as the version of yourself that moves through the world and is seen by others. And when you stop checking in with that version, when you lose the daily habit of acknowledgement, the version drifts. It stops feeling quite like yours. You lose something in your relationship with your own presence. When I started saying hello in the mirror again, after all those years, I felt that something return, a kind of ownership of my own exterior, a kind of being comfortable in my own presence that I hadn't quite had while I was avoiding it. It sounds small. It's not small. There's something important in claiming your own face, in looking at it, in saying hello to it, in accepting the record it carries. The sixth thing I want to talk about, because it belongs here, in a conversation about mirrors and aging and what we see in them, is about what it means to age in a world that has very little patience for the evidence of age. I don't watch much television. I haven't for years, but I see enough of the world to know that the faces in the advertisements, the faces that get held up as the aspirational faces of a culture, are not my face. They're not the face of anyone over 55. The faces that get celebrated are the young ones, the smooth ones, the ones that haven't accumulated much yet. And when that is the face that the world reflects back at you as the good face, the desirable face, the face worth having. When the culture tells you, quietly and constantly, that the face you're carrying is a lesser version of the face you used to have, the mirror becomes a site of comparison rather than a site of truth. That comparison is the real problem, not the face itself, the comparison. My face is not a lesser version of my face at 40. My face at 82 is what my face at 40 was becoming over all those years. They're not different faces. They're the same face at different points of the same long development. And the face at 82 is, in certain ways, the more realized face, the more complete one, the one that has more of the life in it. But if you look at your 82-year-old face through the lens of the culture's preference for 40-year-old faces, you're comparing the most realized version of yourself against a standard that has nothing to do with you. And that comparison can only produce one result. I stopped comparing sometime in the last few years. Not all at once. The reflex is there. It doesn't go away entirely. But I stopped letting the comparison be the primary lens. I started looking at my face the way I look at an old house, not asking, does this look like a new house? Asking, is this a well-made house? Does it have character? Has it weathered well? Is there something in the way it stood up that is beautiful in the way that only things that have stood up can be beautiful? The answer, when I ask that question, is yes. Not always. Some mornings the answer is harder to find. Some mornings the face in the mirror is just a tired old man's face and the question seems beside the point. But mostly, when I look with the right eyes, the answer is yes. Your face, if you are over 65, over 70, over 80, your face is an honest document. It is the record of your life written in the only material that was available. It is not a failed version of your younger face. It is the continuation of it, the development of it, the full, realized, lived-in version of it. Stop avoiding it. Let me say something more specific about this, because I want it to be concrete, not just a general instruction. When I walk past a piece of old wood in the shop, wood that's been out there for years, weathered, maybe slightly checked on the end grain, not as bright as it was when it first came from the mill, I don't see a failed piece of wood. I see what the wood has become. The checking tells me something about how it's dried, about the movement that's happened over time. The weathering tells me it's been outside. The color tells me something about its history. None of that makes it less useful. Sometimes the weathered piece is more useful than the new one. It's already done its moving. It knows how to be where it is. It's stable in a way that new wood isn't always stable. Your face is like that. The lines in it are the checking of the grain. The gray is the weathering. The weight in the features is the history of carrying. None of it makes the face less. In most respects, it makes it more. The old house has character. The old house has survived things. The old house is the one that people save when they can, that they restore when they have the means, because it has something in it that the new one hasn't had time to build yet. Your face is the old house. Stop looking at it through the new house's eyes. The seventh thing, and I want to end here because I think it's where all of this comes to rest, is about Helen's instruction, saying hello. After that morning last spring, after Lily said what she said and I went to the mirror and looked, I started the practice back, every morning. The hallway, the pine frame, the light from the end of the hall. And I started saying hello, out loud sometimes, usually just in my head, but deliberately, intentionally, not asking anything of the reflection, not assessing it, not comparing it to anything, just saying, I see you, you're still here, hello. And then, on the good mornings, I say a little more. I say what I see. I say, I see a man who built a house and it's still standing. I see a man who was married for 54 years to someone who loved him. I see a man who raised 2 children who turned out well. I see a man who spent 45 years making things with his hands that will outlast him. I see a man who is trying, at 82, to be more present than he's ever been, who is trying to be honest, who is trying to be worthy of the years he's been given. That's what I see. Some mornings I see it more easily than others. Some mornings the inventory is harder to come by, but it's there, in the face, if I'm willing to look. Your inventory is there too, in your face. In the face you've been walking past. In the face you've been flinching away from in the hardware store display cases and the rearview mirror and the bathroom glass. All of it. The years, the work, the love, the loss, the long accumulation of who you actually are. It's in there. In the face you've been avoiding, the years you've put in, the people you've loved, the things you've built and grown and tended, the losses you've survived. The mornings you've gotten up anyway. The small kindnesses you've done that nobody knows about. The times you've been wrong and admitted it. The times you've been right and held onto it with grace. All of that is in the face. All of that is looking back at you from the mirror you've been walking past. Stop walking past it. Say hello. Not to the younger face you remember. Not to the face you think you should have. Not to the face the world tells you is the good one. Say hello to the face you actually have. The one that's been through everything. The one that's still here. Say hello. The fires burn down to coals. The morning is gone. The light through the window is the flat, late winter light that doesn't ask much of anything. I'm going to go upstairs now, to the hallway, to the pine-framed mirror that I built in 1983 for Helen, who needed one near the bedroom door. I'm going to stand there for 2 minutes, the way she used to, and I'm going to say hello to my father's face, to Helen's witness, to the record of 82 years, to the man who is still here, still in this house, still trying. I hope you'll do the same, when you're ready, in your own time. If anything I said today reached you, you can subscribe to walk with me a while longer. I read every comment. Tell me about your mirror. Tell me what you see when you look, or what you've been afraid of seeing. I'd like to know. Take care of yourself. Stop walking past it. Say hello. The fire's still going, just barely. I want to leave you with one thing Helen said to me a long time ago. We were in our 50s. We'd been married for about 25 years. And I'd made some dismissive comment about something in my appearance. I don't remember what. Something about getting older. And Helen looked at me for a moment, and she said, "Walter, you are the most beautiful thing I've built a life with." Not, "You are the most beautiful thing I've seen." Not, "You are handsome." The most beautiful thing I've built a life with. She loved the face because of what it was part of, because of the life it belonged to, the life we'd built together. And that's the truest thing I know about faces at this age. The face is beautiful because of what it belongs to. Look at it that way. I'll see you next time.